You're listening to episode 34 of A Whole New You podcast. On today's show, Lori interviews cognitive behavioral therapist Chandra Chappell about anxiety in children. Chandra walks us through the CBT model that links thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. She teaches us to ask a series of questions that challenge anxiety-producing thoughts. Welcome to A Whole New You podcast. I'm your co-host, Kim Maravich. I'm a registered nurse and author of the book 360 Health. I'm joined by my dear friend, Lori Biddle, a health and wellness coach certified through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. Our show exists to inspire and empower women to take charge of their health with weekly tips and conversation about self-care, mindset, nutrition, fitness, and clean living. Please keep in mind that the material provided in this podcast is intended as general information only and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. We're thrilled to have you here. Let's get to the show. Before we get to the show, I'd like to read a 5-star review we received through iTunes. This is from C. Nielsen 30, and it's titled Great Podcast. She writes, "This is such a great podcast with relevant and helpful information. I loved being a guest and getting to know Kim. She is a delightful host who just makes you feel at home and comfortable, and that comes out in the podcast episodes." Thank you so much, Chanel, for leaving this review for us. Ratings and reviews help to boost our rankings, which allows us to be found by others who might not already know about the show. So if you would be so kind as to leave us a review, we'll be sure to read it on a future episode. Without further ado, let's get to our interview with Chandra.
Hi, everyone. I'm here today with Chandra Chappell. She has a master's degree in psychology and is a certified cognitive behavioral therapist. She's actually taking a break right now from her career to raise her 2 children, which so many of us can relate to. She has years of experience as a therapist with children who have anxiety-related diagnosis. She has plans to begin working outside the home again and feels very passionate about providing education regarding anxiety and ways to self-manage anxiety. And I know so many of us need that and can benefit from that, as well as our children. So I'm really excited to get into this today with her. And I actually saw her speak at a local gym, and she pretty much gave the talk that she's going to give for us here today because, as soon as we got through it, I immediately thought, I have to have this on the podcast. We need more people to hear this message. And Kim and I had discussed doing a series on anxiety, and I thought, what a perfect time, to put this in and kind of round out the guests that we've had to make sure that we're kind of covering all bases for you guys when it comes to anxiety, because it's a major problem in our society today, and it definitely affects your health. So I'm going to let Chandra go into a little bit of her personal experience with anxiety, because we all have our stories. Kim and I shared, the first episode of the series, our personal experiences, and we have them every day, all of us, and especially our little ones. So she's going to tell us a little bit about her personal experience, and then we'll go into more of the technical, professional side of things.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me on this podcast. I'm very excited about this. Some of my personal experience: when I was a child, I had dealt with my own anxiety. More specifically, I had social anxiety and performance anxiety. However, as a child, I didn't understand it, nor did I understand what I was feeling or going through. So those experiences had led me to pursue a career in psychology and to study psychology during my undergraduate years to learn more about it. While I was in college, I started to understand anxiety a little bit more and get a understanding as far as what I was going through as a child was not rare or was not very different. It was later, when I was getting my graduate degree in counseling psychology, that I started to even understand more about anxiety. And I felt like that is an area that I wanted to head in to help others. However, also during that time, it was encouraged that individuals going to get your graduate degree in counseling psychology should actually see their own therapist in order to be on the other end of the table, basically. So I did. So I went to see somebody for anxiety to understand my own anxiety and how to better manage my own anxiety. And I actually ended up stumbling upon a therapist who provided cognitive behavioral therapy. And through going through his coursework and through working with the therapist, I was able to better understand my own anxiety and CBT, which is the cognitive behavioral therapy. And with that, it's understanding how your thoughts and your feelings affect one another, and how those thoughts and feelings thus affect your behaviors, and how to get through situations. For instance, if you're feeling anxious about a certain situation, how do I understand the thoughts that are causing that anxiety? And therefore, how do I understand the feelings that my thoughts are causing me to feel in a certain way? And how do I manage that anxiety to better get through situations to feel a little more at ease, and to lower your anxiety in all?
So I know from the talk that you gave at the gym, and it was something that stood out to me, that there's different types of anxiety. So can we go into some of those?
Yes. So, as I mentioned a little earlier, my own anxiety, so I felt it more socially and with performance anxiety. So, those are definitely two types. There's generalized anxiety, which you kind of feel nervous or anxious about all kinds of different situations. Those are your what if, the world ends? What if I get an F on my test? Or I should have done this better, or I could have done this better. So that is all self-talk and questions that we may ask ourselves when we're feeling anxious or nervous in certain situations. And with that being generalized, it's generalized in all different situations. It can be, nervous with school, or nervous with work, or, anxiety when you're driving a car. It's pretty much all over the place. And then there are also specific phobias that people can have. Phobias as, small as riding in an elevator to flying in an airplane or driving in a car. And then the social, as I mentioned before, you see that a lot with children sometimes in school. Learning how to make friends and learning how to be in social situations. And, anxiety is a normal thing. We all have anxiety, but sometimes anxiety can be debilitating, where it can cause us to withdraw from a situation or to not feel included. It can also cause us to avoid certain situations because of our anxiety. So the talk that I'm going to go through today is learning how to understand the anxiety we feel, whether it's small or whether it's big, because it's very much on a spectrum, and how to manage that anxiety so we feel more comfortable in situations that causes anxiety. With that being said, anxiety can also cause us to feel it somatically. So we can feel anxiety in certain ways, such as having a headache, having stomach aches, feeling dizzy, or feeling lightheaded. We can even feel it physically, as far as having a pain in our legs or a pain in our arm. And a lot of times I feel that we don't chalk those things up to having anxiety or understanding why we're feeling these certain somatic symptoms.
I think a lot of times in those situations, especially with like headaches, stomach aches, like we just throw medicine at it, right? Like that's our solution. Stick a Band-Aid on it, But I think, doing this deep dive today and really kind of getting to the root of what could be causing those stomach aches and headaches and dealing with this anxiety is such important work. And I just recently read something about, you had talked a little bit about phobias, and I thought it was interesting reading something about, fear and anxiety and the difference between the two. Because I think in this book it had said that fear is when, you look out your front door and you see a rattlesnake. But anxiety is every time you step out in your front yard, or every time you look out your front door from that time on, or even if you never saw a rattlesnake in your front yard, but every time you look out your front door or step in your front yard, you have anxiety that there could be a rattlesnake, even though maybe you never saw one. Or if you did see one, it doesn't mean they're going to be there every day, but it's like this constant anxiety of what ifs, as you mentioned, and, what's to come. And it's different than fear. Fear is real sometimes, but anxiety is a lot of times self-created. So we have a lot more control over that than we think. And, this cognitive behavioral therapy model is so super helpful. So we're going to dive into that a little bit now, and I hope you all find it as enlightening and helpful as I have.
Before I dive a little bit deeper into the CBT, I just want to comment on something that you had just mentioned. With seeing the rattlesnake and sensing fear, I think that's a very interesting point. Because as we feel anxiety, as we see something that causes us to feel nervous or anxious, our nervous system reacts in a certain way. Whether it's a rattlesnake that could cause us some serious harm, or whether it's walking into a crowd of people and not feeling comfortable, our body senses the two things as danger. And when that happens, we have a body reaction that sometimes we don't understand how to control it and how to manage it. And that is all part of our nervous system. So our nervous system is broken up in two parts. And to go into a brief explanation, there's the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is the part that causes us to go into fight or flight. So do I want to fight this rattlesnake or fight this crowd or walk in there? Or do I want to run away and get out of the situation as quickly as I possibly can? When we have that sense of fear going through our body and our sympathetic nervous system is aroused, we have a hormone that is released called cortisol. That cortisol is secreted by the adrenal glands, which is basically tied into our sympathetic nervous system. That cortisol becomes pumping through our body as quickly as possible and going in our bloodstream in preparation for danger or anxiety, as I had mentioned. It is then the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the other part of the nervous system that controls our rest and relaxation. So when we sense something that is causing us danger, or when we sense something that is causing us a great deal of anxiety, we can go through a series of deep breathing to lower the parasympathetic nervous system, or going into the CBT model, which I'm going to explain a little bit later, on understanding the thoughts that control the feelings and understanding the anxiety and how to decrease that anxiety. Our parasympathetic nervous system then becomes more significant than our sympathetic nervous system. So by doing the deep breathing and by doing the CBT, we can lower our anxiety, manage our anxiety, so that danger or whatever we're facing that causes us the anxiety does not seem so significant after all.
And I just want to say something because I'm really glad that we went into all of that, because this thing about cortisol, and if you guys remember from previous episode that I had did with Be Balanced about our hormones, and that's a real problem because it throws everything out of whack, all of our hormones in our body. And living in this constant state of fight or flight, honestly, probably long-term can do more damage than that rattlesnake that could maybe be in your front yard. So, when we really think about it that way, like anxiety can be very damaging to our physical body. And that's why it's so important for us to get a handle on it, because we cannot constantly live in this state of fight or flight. Our bodies aren't made to do that.
Now we'd like to take a break from our show to give a shout out to our show partner, Perfect Supplements. Perfect Supplements is a family-owned and operated business that supports local farms. Their superfoods and supplements contain no synthetic nutrients, no artificial colors or flavors, and no GMOs. Products range from collagen and bone broth powders to plant proteins, grains, and adaptogenic mushroom and herb capsules. I'm a big fan of their aquatic greens, which contains organic spirulina and chlorella, two forms of nutrient-dense algae known to support the liver and help with detoxification. To check out their wide array of supplements, go to perfectsupplements.com/Kim. If you use coupon code KIM10 at checkout, you'll get 10% off your order. This is a great way to get superfood nutrition while helping to support our podcast. And just as a disclaimer, it's not the intention of our podcast to provide specific medical advice, but rather to provide you with information to better understand the role of dietary supplements in health. We urge you to consult with a qualified healthcare provider to discuss both the advantages and risks of using dietary supplements.
So going more into the cognitive behavioral therapy that we had mentioned previously, I have it broken down into a chart, basically. So on one side, there's a situation, and then T for thoughts, F for feelings, B for behaviors. So I'm going to walk everyone through a situation, a real life situation. The situation being that a child walks up to a group of children who they know on the playground, and as soon as that child walks up to the group, they run away. So based on that situation can cause the person to have some quick automatic thoughts. Those thoughts being, in one person, they might think, they don't like me, no one likes me, I don't have any real friends, I can't believe they just did that, I feel so awful. So based on those thoughts, that person could start feeling rejected, a little sadness, some anxiety, or even some anger. Based on those feelings, that person may behave in a certain way, which could be they might withdraw from other friends or other social situations. They could act out. They could start to ruminate over some of their thoughts and they can't get those thoughts out of their head. Or they could start to reject others before others reject them. At the same situation, another person going into that situation that might have a lot less internal anxiety might think, they want to play tag. They ran away because I should go follow them. Or maybe they're playing a new game and I better go find out what this game is because it looks fun. And based on those thoughts, that person might start feeling happy, excited, really excited because there's a new game. And based on those behaviors or based on those feelings, they behave in a certain way, which is to seek out friendships or to want to play with other children. So my point is that given the same situation, one person could have very different thoughts, feelings, and behaviors based on what's going on internally. And the other person could have very different thoughts, feelings, and behaviors based on what's going on in their internal world. So with that being said, the first person in the example that I had given, it would be beneficial for them to learn how they have different thoughts based upon a situation and how to challenge those thoughts. But first, it comes with recognizing those thoughts. So say they have that same situation and they say, they don't like me, no one likes me, to come up with challenge thoughts to those, what we would call negative automatic thoughts. And some challenge thoughts could be, well, do I have any evidence that they don't like me? And the person could say, yeah, they ran away. Well, how do I know that they ran away because they don't like me? Is this a fact, or is this an opinion that my brain has made up? And when you go through different questions and challenge thoughts such as that, and learn to do that after recognizing those negative automatic thoughts, then in time you start to develop a self-dialogue with yourself, which I think we all do from time to time. We all have this inner voice within us, and it can be more negative or it can be more positive. And that is where the choice lies. So learning how to challenge those negative automatic thoughts over time really does help to let us feel more secure, feel happier, feel more included. And with that being said, it's tricky. So it does take time to learn how to challenge those thoughts, but I think we can all relate to that. I even do it with myself on a daily basis. We all have, we have children, and there are times when I feel that I'm not doing the best job that I can do, or maybe I didn't say something the best way that I could have said it, or whatever it may be. And I start feeling like, oh my gosh, am I doing a good job at being the best mom that I can be? And I start to have my own self-doubt. I still really have to work to challenge some of my own maybe negative automatic thoughts based upon just parenting questions that I've had.
Yeah, don't we all? That is the truth. And it just kind of goes back to like perspective is everything, right? And I love this challenging negative thoughts because that's definitely easier said than done. But I don't know if you're ready to move into some of the anxiety challenging questions, but I think they're really interesting. And I was, on a car ride recently on the way to vacation with my family, and we took this list with us and some other things to kind of talk through different situations, which I think, my kids especially found very enlightening because, as adults, we have a different set of challenges and different things that make us anxious, but it's good for them to kind of hear what's going on in our world and how we have those same feelings that they have, even though they might be about different things. But the challenge questions really, you can do any situation. That's what's so cool about them. Any situation, if you're an adult, you're a child, whatever is going on in your head, these questions work. So they're pretty fascinating.
So to go into more of the questions, I'm going to read the 9 questions that I had used when I had worked, and that I still use with myself and my own children who are 8 and 4. Some of the questions are, what evidence do I have that this will happen? So that's a good one if someone is having anticipatory anxiety about giving a speech and they think, oh my gosh, I'm going to give this speech and everyone's going to laugh at me. And just thinking through, okay, well, do you have any evidence that that's happened before? And if so, then you can move through that and talk through that. If not, then there's no evidence. It's as simple as that. Another one is this a worry or a fact? So that allows us to identify, is this something that my body is making up into feeling worried about, and it's providing energy to this worry or this anxiety that really doesn't need to be worried about. Do I know for sure that this will happen? Is another good one. What are the chances it won't? So that is really just allowing us to come up with facts versus opinions. Is this something that will really happen or isn't it? And how do I know that? So by going through some of these questions, it's allowing us to basically disprove our worry and how to move through that. Some of the other ones are there any other possibilities? What is the worst that can happen? And can I survive it? So worst case scenario, I go and give a speech and someone does laugh. well, what is the worst that can happen? And again, can I survive it? And that might feel uncomfortable, yes, but is it the end of the world? No. How many times has this happened before? And what are things I can do to feel less nervous? So ending with the what are things I can do to feel less nervous is a big one. So there are some things in a certain situation. Say there is a person with as I used earlier, a fear of speaking in front of others or giving a presentation. And as we know in this day and age, with children, they have to start giving presentations as early as first grade now. So there are a lot of common anxieties with getting up in front of a room full of their peers and giving a 3 to 5 minute presentation. And that 3 to 5 minutes for a child can seem like an hour. And how do you talk your child through to going up and giving that presentation? And yes, we can say, you'll be fine, you will do fine, you'll do great. But by saying all those things, very affirmative and very positive, but it's not really teaching the child how to combat their own anxiety in a classroom when mom and dad aren't there. So how do they understand that they are feeling nervous? And that's okay to feel nervous. That is totally fine, because we all feel nervous at times, and that's normal. But when you feel nervous, how do you learn to feel less nervous? And I feel that it's very important to learn these skills at a very young age, being preschool age even. And just to go on a little sidebar, I have a preschooler and I have a daughter who's 8 going into 3rd grade. And I very much use all these things with my own children. My son, who's in preschool, has anxiety about going to preschool and meeting other kids. How do I fit in socially? What if they don't want to play with me? And are you coming to pick me up? Well, of course I'm coming to pick him up. But again, he's in preschool 2.5 hours, and 2.5 hours to a 4-year-old can feel like 8 hours, especially if he's feeling nervous about certain situations. So with that being said, I've worked with him and I've worked with my daughter to do body scans. And when they do a body scan, I have them breathe deep in through their nose and out through their mouth. And that also can be a very tricky thing to teach a 4 and 8-year-old, because when you say breathe deeply, they take little shallow breaths usually. They don't understand what it means to take a deep breath. So helping them understand that can even be key, because when you breathe deeply, as I mentioned earlier, your sympathetic nervous system reacts in a certain way to calm your body when you start taking deep breaths. After they do the deep breathing, I then have them focus on or think about how their body feels before they take deep breaths, and then how it feels afterwards. And chances are, even for my 4-year-old, he's able to verbalize in some way, my hands feel more relaxed, or some sort of his body, he's very concrete, being 4. So he'll say, my toes feel nice, or something of that nature. My 8-year-old, who, is moving more out of the just direct concrete stage of thinking, is able to understand that deep breathing, helps her feel more calm, or helps her feel more fluid with her thoughts, or more relaxed in general. Another thing that I will go into is with the body scan and with the deep breaths and learning how to self-soothe, which I think is a very key component to all this. So as I mentioned before, the child who is getting up to do a presentation, and before they go to school, the parent says, you'll be fine, you will do fine, you'll do great. Again, those are all great positive things to say to your child, but it's not as self-affirming as an I statement. So I always make the joke of, I don't know if anyone remembers, I'm 40, so Saturday Night Live was a very big thing that I watched when I was a kid. But I think it was Stuart Smalley who would look in a mirror and say, I feel great. I love myself. I will do great. Well, all joking aside, that's kind of the same thing as, doing a really positive self-affirming statement. So making those I statements. So helping the child say to themselves, I can do this. I can do this. I can really do this, and I can get through anything, whether I feel anxious or not. I will be great at this. I, might make a mistake, but that's okay. And
my personal favorite, I will survive this. That's my favorite anxiety challenge question. Will you survive this? I will survive this.
Yes, and that is a great one because we will survive, and I can survive as well. And this is something that I often tell myself when faced with something that is anxiety provoking. Giving my first talk regarding this, oh my gosh, the whole way there, I was self-affirming to myself that I can do this. And I probably took at least, 50 deep breaths in the car on the way there. And then another 5 once I got there. But I think it helped. I also feel those somatic symptoms of feeling dizzy or lightheaded before I do something that causes me anxiety. And I notice that when I do the self-affirming thoughts and when I do the deep breathing and when I challenge the negative thoughts that start to creep into my head, because they do, as in, I can't do this, or no one's going to really care what I have to say, or why should they care? I have to stop my thinking and challenge those thoughts. And it really does help. And I no longer feel like I'm going to pass out before giving the presentations.
Yeah, this is all just so helpful on a day-to-day basis because we all have feelings that we need to challenge. And I think it's really interesting how the thoughts and the feelings and the behavior, all are like kind of this big circle. Your thoughts determine your feelings, which determines your behavior. And as, we start to work through this and identify those things, we can start to change our behaviors and change the way we react to things and just be happier, healthier people. Is there anything in closing that you would like to add? I think you've given us some really, really great information and some great tools for our toolbox, to challenge our anxiety.
I really feel like I could probably go on for the next 3 or 4 hours about this. But to summarize, I will say that one thing I did not mention is that I feel is very important is how our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors can really fuel our core beliefs. And our core beliefs are how we perceive ourselves to others and how we really think about our inadequacies or how we think about our strengths. And that is something that is developed at a very early age. And even if we develop core beliefs that maybe aren't as satisfactory at an early age, they can be adjusted through our years and through our adult years. And the way they can be adjusted is by, understanding those thoughts and challenging those thoughts and how they affect the way we feel. And again, just to leave you with one take-home message, as I mentioned a little earlier, is we all have anxiety, and that is okay. Our children all have anxiety, and again, that is okay. It's anxiety that got our ancestors through a situation that was, in fact, life-threatening. But understanding that anxiety can really, really give us those skills to help us self-regulate our own feelings and our own emotions to better equip us for adolescence and to better equip us for adulthood.
So super powerful. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing all this great information.
And thank you for having me.
That's it for today. For more from Kim, you can go to kimmaravich.com. For more from Lori, go to simplympoweredllc.com. We're always open to listener questions or suggestions for the show. You can email those to contact@awholenewyoupodcast.com. We'd also love it if you joined our Facebook community and followed us on Instagram. Just search for A Whole New You Podcast. And lastly, if you'd be so kind as to leave us a rating and review in iTunes, we would really appreciate that so more people can find our show and join our community. We'll see you next week.